Good morning, students. In today's class we will be discussing about two topics. One is the potable water or the portability of water, and also we will discuss about the microbial analysis of water, that is how to quantify the number of microorganisms in a water sample and come to a conclusion that whether the water is potable or not. So starting with portability of water, you would have come across this term. What is potable water? You would have come across this right from your school days. So potable water is defined as the water that is fit for human consumption, that is for drinking or cooking. So any kind of human consumption, the water which is fit for that consumption is called as the potable water. Now this potable water should have some kind of properties. Mainly it should be free from any kind of pathogenic microorganisms. It should be free from chemical pollutants as well as toxic substances. So it doesn't mean that potable water means what? It should not have only microorganisms. No, it should also be free from other chemical pollutants and toxins. So in India, in any country there are some regulatory bodies which will decide what is the standard that a potable water or anything should meet. Okay, and in India the potable water, it meets the standards which is set by the Bureau of Indian Standards, that is BIS. Okay, so potable water, it's also called as drinkable water. That means it is usually free from any unpleasant odor. It should not have any taste. It should not have any other colors. Okay, and it should also be safe, that is it should not have any toxins, any carcinogens, pathogenic microbes, or it should not cause any health hazards. So water quality is determined by three parameters, that is the physical, chemical and the microbial parameters. The physical parameters again will be the turbidity, the taste, the conductivity, the total dissolved solutes, the organoleptic properties, that is again the color, taste and odor, etc. All these come under the physical parameters. Coming to chemical parameters, here comes the concentration of certain chemicals which are present in the water. So under chemical parameters, the pH, the dissolved oxygen concentration, then the chlorine, residual free chlorine or fluorides, or it could be radionuclides. Some kind of radioactive elements are also gaining entry into the groundwater. So other organic and inorganic chemicals like pesticides, fertilizers, so all these come under the chemical parameters which will decide whether the water is potable or not. The third important, the most important parameter is the microbial parameter. So here the presence of certain coliforms or fecal contamination, so that is determined by the fecal coliform count, the total coliform count, the fecal streptococci, or the presence of some cysts or ova of parasites. All these come under the microbial parameters. So potable water must meet several physical, chemical and microbiological and radionuclide standards. It could be raw water or it could be treated water, whatever it is. So the physical parameters, as we already discussed in the previous slide, that means the most obvious aspects that we perceive directly, like when we see water, when we taste water, that is the most direct parameters that we are going to feel. So these are what? The color, the appearance of the water, whether it is turbid, whether it is clear, whether it is having some foul smell, whether it is having some other kind of a taste, and the pH, the turbidity. All these come under the physical parameters. Chemical parameters, I already told you, some dissolved salts like nitrates and fluorides. These are the most important contaminants in water bodies. Apart from that, it can be heavy metals like lead, like cadmium, etc. and some pesticides which are carried by the runoff water into the water bodies. There can be some compounds like cyanide, and also the oxygen concentration, whether it is DO, whether it is BOD, whether it is COD. All these parameters play an important role under the chemical parameters. So any chemical which is present beyond the acceptable limit, that means it is going to cause ill health effects. So two important examples which I would like to quote here is fluorosis. Fluorosis is a chronic health condition where the excessive intake of fluorine by a person, it can cause discoloration and mottling of the teeth, and it can also cause severe skeletal changes, like there will be calcification of the ligaments, etc. So if the fluorine content in water is more, then during a course of time a person can develop this fluorosis disorder. Similarly, the presence of some toxic contaminants which can accumulate in the body upon a long term exposure, like we have discussed about biomagnification, right? So these toxins can cause liver damage, they can be carcinogenic, etc. Now this table I have tried to list out a few examples of the acceptable limits of some important chemicals in potable water. For example, fluoride should be present, the acceptable limit is 1 mg per liter. Then free residual chlorine, that is again 0.2 mg per liter. Nitrate 45 mg per liter. Like that, when we look at heavy metals like lead, it is 0.01 mg per liter. Pesticides like endosulfan, DDT, malathion, all these are like in microgram quantities only, they are acceptable in per liter of water. Similarly, the dissolved oxygen should be more than 6 mg per liter. The biological oxygen demand should not be more than 5 mg per liter. So these are some of the limits of some chemicals in potable water. So looking at the biological parameters of potable water is very important, because for water to be fit for human consumption, it should be ideally free from any biological organisms. Okay, so biological parameters set by the Bureau of Indian Standards, it appears to be for the coliform bacteria. That means if the coliform bacteria, that is the fecal coliform or the total coliform, is present, that means the water is not potable. Okay, that means the water is having fecal contamination. So the standards state that these bacteria should be totally absent if the water has to be potable. So for an organism like E. coli, the acceptable value in potable water is 0 in 100 ml. That means it should be totally absent. Similarly, the total coliform bacteria also is 0 in 100 ml for potable water. So this is about the potability of water and the important parameters, the physical, the chemical and the biological parameters which decide whether the water is potable or not. Now coming to the second topic of today's discussion, it is microbial assessment or microbial analysis of water. So when we say assessment or analysis, it is like testing. You are testing for microorganisms in water. So we know water harbors several kind of microorganisms, but if there is contamination with the fecal contamination, then there are chances of entry of viral, bacterial and protozoal disease causing microorganisms into the water body, and if this is again consumed by other people, it is going to lead to a outbreak of different diseases. Example for bacterial diseases, typhoid, a waterborne disease, cholera, dysentery, all these are waterborne diseases. Similarly, viral diseases like hepatitis, polio, all these are waterborne diseases. Why do we call it waterborne diseases? If you look at the mode of entry of all these pathogenic organisms, it is through the fecal oral route. That means if the feces is present as a contaminant in a water, then if a person consumes it through the oral route, these organisms are going to gain entry into the other person and the disease is going to spread. Okay, so how can we stop all these? The main thing is detect if these pathogens are present in the water. Now if I tell you, okay, I give you a water sample, you check if typhoid bacteria is present or cholera bacteria, dysentery bacteria, hepatitis, polio, all these are present, that means it is going to be a tedious process, because you have a list of n number of bacteria to be checked, okay, and you have very short time. So environmental microbiologists, they generally use certain organisms called as indicator organisms. Okay, that means look for a certain microorganism in the water sample, that is the indicator microorganism. So if the indicator microorganism is present, that is going to provide a clue that fecal contamination is there in the water, so there is chance of pathogenic microorganisms can also be present in the sample. So indicator organisms are those organisms which indicate that or provide a clue that fecal contamination might be there in the water sample. So that is the indicator concept. So what is the indicator concept? Certain non-pathogenic coliform bacteria like E. coli, they occur in the intestines of all warm-blooded animals, and they are also shed in the feces in very large numbers. Okay, so if we are able to detect these coliform bacteria like E. coli in the water sample, that means we can assume or we can come to a conclusion that fecal contamination has occurred in the water sample, and the water can be prohibited from consumption. So if we have to choose an indicator organism, it should have certain characteristics or certain features, only then it can be an indicator organism. So the indicator bacterium, it should be suitable for analyzing all types of water, whether it is tap water, river water, ocean water, sea water, etc. Recreational water, any kind of water, the indicator bacterium should be suitable for analysis. The indicator bacterium should be present wherever the enteric pathogens are present. That means what? Whenever pathogenic organisms are present, this coliform is also coexisting along with that. So that is the second property, and it should survive longer than the pathogen. It should not be like the indicator organism immediately once it is shed into the environment that it will die and the pathogen will remain longer. So when we test it, if we don't find the indicator organism, we'll come to a wrong conclusion that pathogen is absent. So the indicator bacterium should have the capability to survive for longer periods compared to even the most pathogenic enteric pathogen. Then it should not reproduce in the contaminated water and produce an inflated value. That is the next characteristic. Then the assay procedures which are used for detection of these indicator organisms should be highly specific, it should be very simple, it should be easy to perform, and the indicator organism again should be harmless to the person who is working with the sample. And the level of this indicator bacterium in the contaminated water, it should have a direct relationship with the degree of fecal pollution. That means more the amount of coliform bacteria we are able to detect, that means more is the fecal contamination. So these are the characteristics of an ideal indicator organism, and the most ideal indicator organism for testing these water samples are the coliform bacteria, especially the E. coli. Now coming to some of the different techniques which are used for assessment of water. The first one is the membrane filtration technique. It is also called as the MF technique. As the name says, membrane filtration technique, that means what? We are going to filter the water sample. So we have a water sample to be tested, so we will be filtering it through a membrane filter. So whatever the microorganisms are present in the sample, they will get trapped on the filter. So this filter, we will take it and we will plate it onto a media containing an appropriate medium. It can be a general purpose medium if you want to simply enumerate the number of bacteria, or it can be a specific medium if you want to find out only one particular bacteria. For example, if you want to see how many E. coli are there, you can always plate it on EMB agar. If you want to find out some other kind of a pathogen, you can again put it on any other selective media. So once you place this membrane onto the selective media, you incubate it for 24 hours at particular temperature and see for the development of typical colonies. So this will not just show the presence of the number of bacteria, but it will also give the count. For example, if you are filtering out 10 ml of the water sample, so you can actually enumerate. For example, if there are 10 colonies here, you can tell there are 10 bacteria, maybe 10 salmonella or 10 E. coli in the 10 ml of the water sample. So that is the membrane filtration method used for microbial analysis of water. So this technique again has its own advantages and disadvantages. Advantages is very good reproducibility. In a single step we will get all the result, and the filters can also be transferred between different media. That is also possible. Large volumes of the sample can be processed, time is also saved, and also in-site filtration can be done. You can carry the sterile membrane filtration apparatus, filter the water sample in the site, bring the membrane filter to the lab and just do the plating. That is also possible. And the cost is also comparatively less compared to the MPN procedure. But the disadvantage is, if the water is highly turbid, that means what? There can be clogging of the pores of the filter. And also, if there are high populations of the bacteria, that means the plate can be overcrowded and you cannot count or differentiate the colonies. So you will not get proper numbers. And also, if there is presence of certain other chemical toxicants like heavy metals or phenols etc. in the water sample, that can inhibit the growth of the microorganisms because they will be easily absorbed by the filter. So those are the advantages and disadvantages of membrane filtration technique. Now coming to the second and the most widely used method is the most probable number. You would have come across this as MPN test. So what we do in the MPN test, we take a sample of water, okay, and we add aliquots of the water sample, like we have 5 tubes each in 3 sets. So the first set we will add double strength lactose broth, okay, then we will add single strength lactose broth to these 2 sets. That is because to the first set of 5 tubes we are going to inoculate 10 ml of water sample. When we add 10 ml of water sample, the media will get greatly diluted. So to avoid that, we will add double strength lactose broth, and to the next 2 sets we will add 0.1 ml of water is inoculated to each of these tubes, and 1 ml of water sample is inoculated to this set of tubes. And if you see, there is an inverted Durham's tube in all these test tubes. So these test tubes are incubated at 37 degrees for 24 hours, and we will look for acid and gas production. We would have done the carbohydrate utilization test, right, in your practicals. The same principle holds good here. The coliform bacteria, they are capable of utilizing lactose as a sole source of sugar. They will ferment lactose producing acid and gas. So a positive test indicates when the color of the medium turns yellow and a air bubble is seen in the Durham's tube. That shows a positive test. Now how do we interpret the MPN results? We will count the number of positive tubes in each set. For example, here there are 5 positives in the 10 ml tubes, there are 2 positive tubes in the 1 ml tubes, and there are 0 positive tubes in the 0.1 ml tube. So we will take this value as 5, 2 and 0. Now this value we will correlate with a standard MPN chart, which will tell that, okay, if this is the number of positive tubes, this much will be the number of E. coli which is present in the water sample. So based on that MPN chart, we will try to interpret whether the water is fit for consumption or not. Now the third and the most important widely accepted technique, this is like a gold standard for water testing, is the multiple tube fermentation test. Now the multiple tube fermentation test, it starts with the MPN test, like what we discussed in the previous slides. So here again, lactose broth tubes, they are inoculated with different volumes, that is 10 ml, 1 ml and 0.1 ml. Then we will check for acid and gas production. So later the test is taken for further confirmation and completion. So this is the overall flow or the process how this multiple tube fermentation test is carried out. Now this is a very specific test where we can get the exact coliform count, and also we can confirm that it is due to E. coli. Whatever the results are obtained is because of E. coli, which is the indicator organism. Now this test is done in a 3-stage test. It is a 3-stage procedure. So you can see here there are 3 arrows: the presumptive test, the confirmed test and the completed test. So in the presumptive test, like what we saw in the MPN, we will get the water sample, we will inoculate 10 ml into double strength lactose broth, 1 ml into again 5 tubes of lactose single strength broth, or it can be Laurel tryptose broth, and again 0.1 ml into 5 lactose broth tubes. Again you can see an inverted Durham's tube in all these tubes. We will incubate this overnight or for 24 hours and check for examine for acid and gas production. So whatever we get a positive tube, okay, if there is negative presumptive test, that means there is absence of gas in the Durham's tube, and there is also no color change because there is no acid production. So this is the presumptive test. So what if we get a positive result in the presumptive test, then we have to move on for the confirmed test. So in the confirmed test, what is done? A tube which shows positive for both acid and gas production, it can not only be because of Salmonella, Shigella and E. coli strains, but it can also be due to non-fecal coliforms like Enterobacter aerogens and Klebsiella. In order to rule out this, in the second stage, the presence of enteric bacteria is confirmed by taking a positive lactose broth tube, okay, and it is again re-inoculated into a brilliant green lactose bile broth and incubated. Again it is observed for gas production. So if there is gas production, it indicates a positive confirmed test. Now this is again streaked onto EMB agar. EMB agar means eosin methylene blue agar. So if it is E. coli, then it will form characteristic greenish metallic sheen, right? So if it is some non-lactose fermenters, they will form colorless colonies, and if it is E. coli, you will get greenish metallic sheen. If it is Enterobacter, you will get reddish. So here we can differentiate that the acid and gas production was because of E. coli, or because of some non-fecal coliforms, or if it is because of some non-lactose fermenters. So in this stage we can confirm. So from here again, the bacteria is also inoculated into a brilliant green lactose bile broth, and again finally to complete the test to observe for acid and gas production, and it is parallelly streaked onto a nutrient agar slant. So after 24 hours we can take the and perform a gram staining from the nutrient agar slant. If we find gram negative non-spore forming rods which produce gas from lactose, then the completed test is positive. So this is the 3-stage multiple tube fermentation test, which has the presumptive, the confirmed and the completed test, which is used for the microbial analysis of water. So although several sophisticated tests, like we can always perform a PCR, we can do some other tests also, a direct plating, etc. Many different tests are present. The frequently and the most widely used tests for detection of the microbial analysis or for detection of fecal contamination is the MPN and the multiple tube fermentation test. So this is about the microbial assessment of water. So in today's class we discussed about potability of water, that was the first topic, and then the second topic we discussed about the microbial assessment of water, under which we discussed 3 procedures. One, the membrane filtration technique, the most probable number or the MPN, and we also discussed about the multiple tube fermentation test. Hope you all understood. Thank you.